Good morning and welcome to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. My name is Bill Benson. I am the host of the museum's public program, First Person. Thanks for joining us today. We are in our 17th year of the First Person program, and our first person today is Mr. Marcel Hodak, whom we shall meet shortly. This 2016 season of First Person is made possible by the generosity of the Lewis Franklin Smith Foundation with additional funding from the Arlene and Daniel Fisher Foundation. We are grateful for their sponsorship. First Person is a series of conversations with survivors of the Holocaust who share with us their firsthand accounts of their experience during the Holocaust. Each of our First Person guests serve as volunteers here at this museum. Our 2016 season finishes with tomorrow's First Person program. The museum's website, listed on the back of your program, will feature information about our program, which will begin in March of 2017. The address is www.ushmm.org. Anyone interested in keeping in touch with the museum and its programs can complete the Stay Connected card that you'll find in your program or speak with a museum representative at the back of the theater. In doing so, you will receive an electronic copy of Marcel Hodak's biography so that you can remember and share his testimony after you leave here today. Marcel will share with us his first-person account of his experience during the Holocaust and as a survivor for about 45 minutes. If we have time toward the end of our program, you'll have an opportunity to ask Marcel some questions. The life stories of Holocaust survivors transcend the decades. What you are about to hear from Marcel is one individual's account of the Holocaust. And we begin with this portrait of Marcel Hodak, taken in 1940. Marcel was born to Jewish parents on August 25, 1937, in Paris, France. Here we see Marcel's parents, Jules and Vega, who were both born in Romania, but moved to Constantinople, Turkey, which is now Istanbul, with their families. They met and married in Turkey. Marcel's sister, Esther, was born in Turkey in 1921, and 1 year later, Marcel's parents emigrated to Paris. Marcel and his two older brothers, Jean and Achille, were all born in Paris. In May 1940, German troops invaded France and quickly captured Paris. The terms of the armistice divided France into two parts, with the northern part of the country under direct German control. Southern France remained unoccupied, but was ruled by a French collaborationist government headquartered in the city of Vichy. This map shows the invasion routes of the Germans into Western Europe in 1940. This photograph is from between 1940 to 1942 and shows members of Marcel's extended family wearing Jewish stars. Shown here are Marcel's uncle, aunt, and cousins. Marcel's family fled German-occupied Paris for Vichy in the summer of 1942. They ended up in the town of Brie-les-Bains in Haute-Savoie, where they would remain for the duration of the war in France. In this photo, we see Marcel's mother, who is second from the right, and three of her sisters taken in Brie-les-Bains during the war. The family lived in a local boarding home. Marcel and his family returned to Paris in May 1944, and Allied forces liberated Paris on August 25, 1944, and August 25th also is Marcel's birthday. Marcel watched American troops parade down the Champs-Élysées after the liberation of Paris. With his two brothers, Marcel immigrated to the United States, arriving in New York in 1946 at age 9. His parents followed in 1950. In 1956, when he was 19, Marcel joined the U.S. Air Force. After his training, he was stationed in Paris, where he met his wife Mimi, who was from Israel. They married in 1958. Their first son, Mark, was born in Paris in 1959. Over the next few years, Marcel was stationed in Omaha, where his second son, Michel, was born in 1962, and Spain, where their third son, Manny, was born in 1966. He also had posts in upstate New York, Wyoming, and Andrews Air Force Base here in the Washington, D.C. area. Marcel left the Air Force in 1967 and has remained in the area since. Although he was trained as a high-wire electrician, Marcel moved into the computer field. He was with Freddie Mac until 2004. In 2004, Marcel's wife passed away after 47 years of marriage. Their 3 sons have given them 5 grandchildren who are between the ages of 7 and 26. Marcel became a volunteer with this museum in 2007. You will find him here Friday mornings working with volunteer services. Marcel is joined today by his significant other, Elaine, who is sitting next to Marcel in the front row. And with that, I'd like to ask you to join me in welcoming our first person, Mr. Marcel Hodak. Thank you, Marcel. Marcel, thank you for joining us and for being willing to be our first person today. We are very glad to have you with us.
My pleasure.
We just have a short time, so we'll get started right away, Marcel. Before we turn to the war years, which began with Germany's invasion of Poland in September 1939, followed by their attack on France in May of 1940, let's begin with you telling us what you can, knowing that you were so young, about your parents and your family and their community prior to the war.
Well, you have to remember, I was 3 years old when it first started. And the memory going back to that is just what I heard. Most of it was rationing, not being able to go out at certain times, curfews, rarity of supplies outside, like a war zone.
Before we turn to the war, tell us about your parents. What do you know about their early years before they were married?
My mother was born in Kishinev. Kishinev is well thought of. There was a large pogrom, and they felt that they had to leave the area, so they moved out to Constantinople. And that's about it. My father was born in Hatin, Romania. Nobody heard of it, neither did I. But he moved out also to during all the pogroms, all the problems they had with the Russians.
So that's why they moved to Constantinople as well. Your father, I think you told me that he spoke 7 languages.
Yes, he did. He never went to school.
Never went to school, but spoke 7 languages. What was his occupation?
He was a presser. He ironed women's clothes.
And how about your mom?
My mom was the best seamstress in town.
And a big town at that, Constantinople. Yes. I think you told me your mother had 15 siblings.
Yes.
How large was your total extended family?
Well, it started with 15 children, but it ended up with about 7 uncles and aunts. And each one had his share of children.
So a very large extended family. Yeah. After your parents married in Constantinople, they then decided to move to Paris. Why did they make that move?
Well, they made that move before my aunt, my father's side, decided to come to the United States.
Okay.
But my mother's side decided to go to Paris. So my father, to make my mother happy, decided to go to Paris.
So you had some family in the United States then at that time?
My aunt and uncle, all my father's siblings were in Brooklyn.
Tell us a little bit about your own siblings. You were I think you were the last one to come along.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about them. You were born considerably later, I think, than the last.
I was an accident.
You were an accident, okay. I think after your sibling right before you was born, as I recall, your mother thought she could no longer have children, and then, as you said,
That's
you were
what
born,
the doctors told my mother. You can't have any more children, and here I am.
And here you are. When your parents moved to Paris, do you know what life was like for them when they first arrived there? What was their life like?
In the 1920s, Paris was a lovely place. Everybody, it was like the United States now, where everybody wants to come to the United States. But in those days, it was easier to go from one country to the other.
And that was the destination to go to?
Yes, sir.
Did they resume the same occupations when they got to
Yes,
Paris?
sir.
Yeah. And they were able to make ends meet and all of that?
Well, with my mother's job, she's so fine at that trade that everybody came to have clothes made by her.
Germany invaded France in May 1940, and Paris became an occupied city. But your parents decided, they remained in Paris until 1942. What do you know about, or what can you tell us about, from what you've learned about those 2 years of living in occupied Paris under the Germans?
Well, like I said before, food was scarce,
Right.
houses were scarce, Germans commanded everything you needed. And what happened in 1942, they started requiring Jews to be registered as Jews. And this actually helped them to make the Jews in Paris become what they called non-citizen Jews.
Before we go on to 1942, just a couple of other questions. When the Germans first occupied in May of 1940, Paris was bombarded by the Germans. Do you have any recollection about that?
Well, I was told that
Okay.
while my mother was running towards the shelter, that a shrapnel hit my blanket and it burned through the blanket.
A piece of shrapnel burned through
Yes,
the
sir.
blanket, yeah.
And they were surprised that I survived. I'm always surprised I survived.
I'm glad you did. You shared with me that at that time when the Germans first attacked, the French had what they called the Maginot Line, and they were convinced that that was going to last. What was the Maginot Line?
Maginot Line was an armament that surrounded Paris in the north because they expected an attack coming from Germany. But when the Germans attacked, they went around the line and didn't even get shot up. My uncle, who had been in the front lines, was wounded and eventually died in a German prison.
Your parents had become French citizens, and so your parents and your siblings had their French citizenship taken away from them, but that didn't happen to you. Explain that for us.
Well, I was born in 1937, maybe less than 6 years old. And everybody during that period had to wear a Star of David. And since I was not 6 years old, I didn't have to wear a star.
And as you mentioned a moment ago, because they lost their citizenship, they basically were stateless at that point. They were without
That's correct. And able to be picked up because the accord that was signed with Pétain.
Who was the head of the Vichy government.
Yes, sir. And the accord was that they wouldn't take French citizens. And since they lost their citizenship, they were takeable.
So they just decreed that this large group of people just lost their citizenship,
Yes, sir.
including your family, except you.
Yeah.
You started to tell us about 1942. In the summer of 1942, your family left Paris for Vichy, or Free France.
We left in June.
June of 42. Tell us about your parents' decision to leave Paris and go to Vichy, and tell us what Vichy really was.
Well, in June 1942, there were rumors and policemen that didn't believe in what the government was doing. They decided to pick up the Jews. And since my father heard that part of the requirement, he decided it was better to leave Paris. So they left Paris. And a month later, which was July 1942, they picked up 4,250.
4,100.
Thank you, Elaine.
And all of them were sent to Auschwitz and never came back, except for 100 people. No children came back.
And I think you had told me that your father or your parents had heard that there were rumors about camps being set up and detention and concentration
Yes.
camps, and that's part of the reason that
It
they
was
fled.
called the La Grande Rafle, or the big pickup.
The big pickup. And the RAF, those were, the roundups involved sealing off ends of streets, right, where they would seal off entire blocks.
And the French police go from house to house. Because in Europe you had to register yourself with religion from where you were, so that they knew exactly where to go and how many people to pick up.
I think you told me when we were chatting one time that some French would denounce Jews because they wanted their apartments.
Yes, sir.
Say a little bit about that.
Well, the unfortunate part is that there's a lot of jealousy in the whole world, not just in Paris. But people who were desiring somebody's apartment would denounce those people to the French police, and then they would get picked up.
And sent to camps and then on to Auschwitz from
Yes,
there.
sir.
Your parents, so then, as you said, June 1942, moved into Vichy France. Vichy was controlled by a collaborationist government, but at that time it was not occupied by German troops. Is that right?
Well, it was not occupied, but it
Under
was
the control.
called Free France. Free France meaning that you could walk around, do whatever you wanted, but in reality it still belonged to the Germans.
Right.
Just like the south of France was under the protection of the Italians. And from that point, when the Italians decided to get away from the accord with the Germans, the Germans attacked the Italians.
When your parents made the decision to go to Free France or Vichy France, did they have a destination in mind? No, they
just got on the train, and we stopped in a few stations. And what happened is that we met other family members, not in the same car, but different cars. We met in Montcuq, which is a very funny word, especially if you're a foreigner. It sounds like a dirty word, but...
So that was a town where you met?
It's a town, and then everybody, we couldn't go back to Paris. The French SNCF said, you can't get back on the train. And how did they know who we were? Our ID cards had J's on them, saying Juif. So they wouldn't let us on the train.
So where did you end up then?
Brie-de-Bain.
Brie-de-Bain. And what kind of place was Brie-de-Bain?
Little town known for the sulfur bath. It was a summer area where people used to go to get bath.
Like an old resort community? Yeah. Where was it situated?
South of France.
South of France.
Not far from the Alps.
Not far from the
Alps.
Alps.
You could see the Alps. You could, well, it was where all the goings on. We're near a port there, Marseille, in the south of France.
Once you were there, you would then spend the duration of your time before the end of the war in France there. What was what was life like in Brede-Laban once you moved into this town?
Well, I must have gone to school because I was the age, school age. I learned my alphabets, I learned adding and stuff like that, which when I got to the United States, people thought I came from Mars and thought I needed lessons.
I'm going to ask you about that a little bit later. When you went into Brede-Laban, it was the six of you?
The six of us, my brother, when the Germans started occupying that area, my brother, my eldest brother, decided to join the underground. My mother still sewed and stuff like that. My father became a lumberjack. You imagine somebody that's a presser, a woman, clothes presser, becoming a lumberjack. All his thumbs, all his fingers had marks, stubbed fingers, very bad shape.
Really tough work for him.
Yeah.
When you were in Brede-Laban during that time, were you, because he was working then, you weren't in hiding there, did you?
I went to church.
You went to church, okay.
And the church priest would come and I have my hat on, and the priest would come and just take my hat, put it on my lap. I didn't know that you're not supposed to wear a hat. But what happened is that later on, in the 50s, 60s, my brother says, you know, that priest that took your hat off, he was in the underground also. He was there to spy on the town.
On behalf of the underground, so
Yes,
he posed as the priest in that town?
Yes, sir. He even wore the cassock.
Did your whole family go to church while you were there?
No, just me.
Just you, just you.
I volunteered.
Okay. Did you have to lead, because presumably there weren't many other Jews in this small town.
Right.
Did you lead a clandestine life?
My parents maybe, but not
you.
To me it was normal life. I did whatever I wanted. I played with the kids around there. I don't think they knew I was Jewish. As a matter of fact, where you had the picture of my mother, on the bottom of that balcony, German trucks, 6 German trucks got parked there. And one of the Germans saw us on the balcony, so he came running upstairs and knocked on the door. And we opened it because we thought he was break down the door.
Right.
At any rate, he comes in and he says, "Ich will a Glas Wasser." He said that several times, and the boy I was with, because we were in his apartment, said, "I don't understand." And then I said, he wants a glass of water. He says, okay, and he gave him a glass of water. Then the German turned to me and he said, "You're Jewish, aren't you?" And we said, "No, we're not." And we were saved. Anyway, he drank his water and he went back down. We were scared other Germans would come up.
Of course. Is that something you remember? That wasn't just told you. You remember
I
that?
dreamed that all the time.
Dream that all the time. Wow. I'm going to go back to you telling us about your parents earning a living in this small town. Your father had to do this really difficult work as a lumberjack, and he wasn't great at it. And you told me that they knew that
His boss knew he was Jewish,
and so
he
protected him.
Since he was an important job, they said that he could stay and work and not be taken away.
Okay. You mentioned that your oldest brother ended up joining the French resistance, which I think they called the Maquis. You had said to me that this area of France, particularly around this town of Brive-la-Ban, was a hotbed of the French resistance, or the Maquis.
That's correct.
Tell us about the Maquis. Tell us about these people.
Well, I have no idea if my brother shot anybody, but he almost got involved in shooting Germans because they were all over the place. But the Germans were scared. The Germans were scared. That's relative. But they were worried to do anything in the town for retribution from the underground. So both sides were worried about retribution.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what your brother did? I mean, you don't know if he actually killed anybody. What
I know he had a rifle.
He had a rifle.
Because he came into town and gave me the rifle to carry, and it was so big I used to drag it by the...
And you remember that, too.
Oh, I remember that fine, yes.
The resistance, the Maquis, they hid up in the mountains around Brive-la-Ban and the forest.
Alps.
In the Alps. They hid up in the Alps.
He was dressed, that's where they got stuff parachuted to them. And my brother would bring home canned foods that we couldn't get otherwise.
And they were parachuted in, the canned goods, by the
Yes.
Allies, dropping goods to the
Yes.
resistance fighters?
Well, you say Allies, I say Americans.
Okay, the Americans. So you told me that when they would come down from the mountains and come into Brive-la-Ban, it was a big event, right?
Yeah, it was fiesta coming down the streets, me carrying the gun.
For your brother?
It was a parade, everybody's kissing and giving flowers. Very jubilant time.
But there was always the threat of the Germans then coming in. So
No, we didn't do the same thing for the
Right.
Germans.
No. There were you told me there were obviously people that were collaborationists, there were spies for the Germans.
They paid at the end of the war.
Why do you think during that time, during the war, why do you think that you and your family were not denounced as Jews, or your brother denounced for being in the resistance? Why do you think those that were collaborationists in the town did not do that?
I have no idea whatsoever. All I know is that we survived. We lived. I think I lived a normal life, but in reality, it was not really that normal.
From what you learned later from your siblings who were older than you and your parents, what was life like for them? Yours, as a young child, as you said, it was sort of a normal life. What was it like for them during that time? On some level, it had to be scary.
Well, when the Germans took over, my brother, my next to eldest brother, couldn't go to school anymore because he was Jewish. The restrictions that were set up by the Germans in Paris were not now stated in the south of France too. So we were under lock and key, if you will.
During that time, I think, if I remember right, your sister, your older sister.
Okay. Yeah. What happened is that the women during that period changed their names so that they wouldn't be seen as Jewish. One of the things that we do as Jews, we get circumcised, and women don't have circumcision, so the men were told to take their pants off, and a lot of times to make sure that they were not Jewish.
I was going to ask.
Women, my sister was named Edith. No, Esther. She changed it to Edith. My cousin was called Danielle Rochelle. And then during the war, she changed it to Dan. Dan short for Danielle, but didn't go by the word name Danielle.
Your sister ended up, while you were there, she married the owner of a local owner of a hotel.
Yes.
That was not a happy event for the family at the time,
No,
was it?
we didn't believe in intermarriage.
So she married a non-Jew.
That's
But there's more to the story, right? He was am I right that he was a member of the resistance as well?
yes. Him and my brother were in the same outfit.
And did that make it more palatable for your parents?
Well, the war made it more palatable, and on top of that, she married a non-Jew, so that it made her safe.
You had you'd shared with me that that those that did collaborate with the Germans, there was retribution against them, and so it might have kept them from denouncing people like yourself because they would be handled roughly.
Well, yes, they would be handled roughly, and the priest that was with us in the church would have denounced them also to the underground.
Right.
So that everybody did their stuff so that you didn't overstep your liberties. And then, yeah, I guess that's a lot of it.
Mm-hmm. So you continued to live in Bried-Liban for two full years until August of 1944, when the family moved back to Paris. What made it possible for you in August of 1944 to leave Bried-Liban and go to Paris? And then what was life like for the family in Paris?
Because the restriction that was set up by the SNCF was lifted so that the Jews could get back on the trains and go back home. We were very lucky in that we left one of the first ones. And we got there in time to see the parade of the American GIs coming down, 12 along the Champs-Élysées. If you've been to France, you got to know the Champs-Élysées. It's the biggest road that you could ever see, at least what we would call 8 lanes, right in the center of Paris. Mm-hmm. And you got 24 men in a row coming down the road. I was on my father's shoulder to see the parade. And it was a big holiday because it's my birthday.
It was your birthday, that's right. You shared with me something that you had written yourself, in which you said you watched you watched the most magnificent parade of a lifetime.
It was.
Yeah.
Lots of men, all in uniform. The American troops were there.
Mm-hmm. People crying, you told me that it was just...
all crying, kissing, giving them flowers for the guns and all that sort of stuff.
To go back just a little bit, that was, of course, official Liberation Day was August 25th.
Yes.
You were already back in Paris, which allowed you to see that. D-Day occurred June 6th, so the Allies swept through, the U.S. and the Allies swept through pretty quickly. But you said that the Maquis, the resistance that your brother was part of, as well as the priest and others...
They fought in Paris.
They fought in Paris, and they played a very significant role in pushing the Germans back at that point, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. They're the only ones that actually fought. The French army was not capable of fighting, except for the Free French troops that de Gaulle commanded.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And in fact, I think you shared with me that the resistance actually are the ones who liberated Paris.
Yes, without blowing up. Hitler had wanted to blow up Paris, but it never worked out. They found all the bombs and defused them.
Your brother Jean was a member of the resistance. Were there other Jews that were part of the resistance?
Actually, what happened is that there were the underground was a communist outfit.
Okay.
And most of the communists were the Jews. Why? I don't ask me. I'm not politically inclined, but it seemed to me that they all joined. They didn't want the Germans to be in charge in Paris, especially after they heard what they did to the 70,000 Jews during the war.
There was, during that time that your parents left in the summer of 1942, there were several huge roundups.
Oh, yeah.
One is the Daviv, I'm not saying it
Pardon?
right, the one at the Velodrome.
Velodrome.
The Velodrome,
Yeah.
where thousands and thousands.
They put 30,000 people in the Velodrome, which is just like your velo is bicycle, two-wheeler. They used to practice for the Olympics in that Velodrome.
An enclosed.
It's enclosed, no bathrooms. It was good, thanks to the fire department that they finally got bathrooms and hosed down, because little kids were running all over the place till they were really tired.
And thousands were held in there in that 30,000 in July. Although the war ended for you and your family in August of 1944, the war continued, of course, until May 1945, when Germany surrendered. During that period between August 44 and the end of the war, what was your family's life like, your life like in Paris?
Well, we got care packages from my aunt in Brooklyn, and they were full of goodies. And my sister had learned English in school. And we got a package, like it said Tide, right? Tide is soap. Well, my sister, her English was not that great. She read soup.
I was hoping you were going to tell this.
So my mother got on the black market, bought a chicken, and put it in a pot. And then she turned over the Tide on the chicken, and the thing boiled, and then we had suds all over the kitchen. But we had the cleanest chicken they ever ate.
How quickly was a sense of normalcy able to return? Like could you start? Did schools resume?
Well, school started again.
Okay.
My mother made me sleeves to put on, so I don't dirty my shirt with ink.
Okay.
And I went to school. Everything was back to normal for me anyway.
For you. When did your parents begin making efforts or planning to leave France?
Well, when we got these packages from the United States,
From your relatives?
there were so many good things in those packages that my mother and father said, it's a good time to leave Europe. Europe was not a nice place to be. So they decided to send me and my brothers to America. Now, when we got to America, I never saw the fruit that was given to me, and I ended up with an orange. What do I do with an orange? So I ate it like an apple. And people looked at me as, were you some kind of nut? So I peeled it and the whole thing in one shot.
You came here with your brothers in 1946.
Yes, I did.
Your parents were still in Paris. Tell us what you can about how they were able, even though we know you had relatives in the United States, what did it take for your parents to be able to get you and your
Well,
brothers out?
they were part of a quota.
Okay.
Now, my brothers and I were born in France, so we were under French quota,
Okay.
which is not filled. Nobody from France wanted to come to the United States. It was people that were not originally French. So anyway, my mother and father both were foreigners. You know, the Germans try to say they were foreigners. While Romania, which is in Eastern Europe, was a place that didn't get a high quota.
And so they were both under the Romanian quota. Okay.
Yes, sir. So they decided to send us to the United States, and then we would ask for our parents to come in.
You came by ship?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that?
I told Stu. I told his, isn't he a musketeer?
Mm-hmm.
See, that was the name of the ship. And it was a troop ship, and we slept in hammocks. Now, it was fun.
And you're with both your brothers, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the three of you.
We stuck together. We were all in hammocks, eating the food. It was French bread. But when we got to New York, there was a strike. We couldn't get off the boat. So then new food started to come on board. They didn't want us to die on the ship, I guess. So they sent us American bread, which is made with milk. And that was the first time I got sick on the boat. Like, the bread was awful.
And I think you ended up staying on the ship for 2 weeks
Yes.
during this longshoreman strike
Yes.
that was taking place. When
But I didn't have to go through Ellis Island.
As a result of that, okay. So when you landed, when you actually were off the boat and on the shore, soon after you and your brothers were split up.
One went to the Bronx. Me and my middle brother were in Brooklyn.
And you were 9 at the time. And so,
I was
and they were at least 10 years older than you, I think?
10, 11,
10,
9. One was 9, one was 11 years older.
Apart from the bread, what else did you think of America at that time? Do you know?
It was
Remember?
wonderful. He
Okay.
got all this fruit in the house. Actually, I used to make my uncle mad. He used to buy fruit by the basket. And I was the only one to eat the food.
You started school in the United States.
I did.
Tell
I
us-
started in first grade.
They put you in the first grade. Why? Because of language?
It was easier for them to put me in first grade so I could learn the language.
I think.
And I was not that big, so it didn't hurt anything.
But at one point, I think you told me that you took 4 English courses simultaneously
In high school.
in high school. 4.
One was for speech, one was because I had a Brooklyn accent, so they say I needed a speech class.
Speech therapy. Remember, you're telling me that the other students all called you Frenchy.
Yes.
That was your nickname, Frenchy. Eventually, your parents would make it to the United States. When did they arrive, and what made it possible for them to get here?
Well, it was our being able to fill in the thing. Also, one of my brothers, Achille, was working for the United Nations, for which he worked 48 years. He worked for them.
In fact, I think you told me that he was the longest-serving employee
Yes,
in the United Nations.
Made the newspaper.
Made the newspapers, yeah. So your parents, because of the quota, they were able to come over here because now your brothers, you all had American citizenship.
Well, not yet.
Not yet. So
I got my citizenship when I joined the military.
joined the military, but your brothers, were they able to sponsor your parents?
Never became American.
Never did. So how did your parents come over? Who did they have to?
Well, we had to prove that we could afford.
Okay, so
to have
you
them.
were able to give them affidavits
Yes.
saying that you would support them when they
Yeah.
came over.
Well, my brothers did.
Your brothers, not you, right? When your parents arrived, 1950,
Yeah.
what was life like for them when they got here?
Well, my mother, actually, the way my mother came to the United States was she had to sign papers that she would not try to vote in the United States because she couldn't read or write. But
English.
they made her French, any language.
Any language, okay.
She was illiterate.
Illiterate, okay.
But she knew more than most of the people that are illiterate.
So she had to sign a statement saying that she would not try to
Yes,
vote.
because it was tough to become American in
Right.
those days.
You mentioned earlier you had a cousin, Rochelle. Rochelle, I believe, ended up writing a book.
Yes.
Tell which you learned about. I think you read later.
I read about this book, and it talked about me and my brothers, and it told us exactly what happened in Brie-de-Liban. She actually lost her parents. They got picked up by those trucks that were under the balcony. Her parents got put on that truck. And the way she got saved was that they sent out her little sister to bring her home so that they could have the entire family, and the underground would let her get near the house so that she was saved also.
And they went to Auschwitz.
Yeah.
So you learned a lot about that time from reading Rochelle's book.
Yes.
Yeah. Was she a member of the resistance as well?
Yes.
She was. She was as well.
Her picture is in front of the book with her military clothes.
And of course, at the time, you did not know any of that. No. What was, in 1956, you were 19 years of age, and you joined the Air Force, and you got stationed in Paris.
That was
Tell us about that.
an accident.
An accident, okay.
I have all these accidents in my life. But what happened is that I'm walking on the base, and was it that one? Yeah, well, I'm walking on the base, and I see base locator. I see base locator, I bet you they could find anything. So I went in there, and I said, I'm looking for my cousin. And I gave him the name, and lo and behold, he was on the barracks behind me. So he was my best friend from Brooklyn. And so I got the guts one day. I went to see my commander, and I said, I got family in Paris. I would like to get anywhere in Europe. And he said, let me see what I could do. Everyone in my class went to Okinawa, except for me. I went to Paris. The next class, everybody went to Europe, except one guy who went to Okinawa.
So it all evened out somehow, it sounds
Yeah.
like. So what was it like for you now as a member of the U.S. military to be back in Paris, not really all that long after the war?
Nylons and cigarettes I bought to my family, and everybody was happy with that stuff. You couldn't find nylons anywhere except on the PX.
Even 10 or 11 years after the
Yes.
war, yeah.
And cigarettes for sure, whiskey for sure. They didn't have any place to make liquor, and I was able to get it and pass it on to the
French
folks.
family. You received the Air Force Commendation Medal.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, I was acting like normal, doing my job, and all of a sudden, my commander says, "I'm giving you your medal." And I was surprised. In fact, I got the medal when I was at Andrews. And the general gave me the medal, and they said, you got a medal for it. And I was surprised, but I didn't give it back.
When you were stationed in Paris or any time since then, have you been back to Bride-le-Ban?
Never.
No.
No. My brother-in-law, who owned the hotel,
The one your sister married, right?
yeah, said, don't even go back. You won't recognize anything.
Did you tell me that that was the site of a subsequent Winter Olympics, that area?
Yes.
It was, yeah.
Albertville.
Which is right by Bride-le-Ban?
Yeah, they had the barracks in Bride-le-Ban.
So your sister, who married the owner of the hotel, she stayed?
She stayed and died there.
Stayed and died there.
True-blooded French.
You told me that you're the only one remaining for your family. And
That's it.
And that is very painful for you. Will you?
Well, I'm lonely for the family.
Right.
You know, much as you argue with your siblings, they're still loved.
We have time to turn to our audience to see if you folks might have some questions you'd like to ask Marcel, and if you don't, I'll continue asking questions. But we're going to, a couple of things. One, it's our tradition at First Person that our first person has the last word. So to close out the program, I will turn back to Marcel for his last word. When Marcel finishes that, our photographer Joel, who you've seen snapping away here, will come up on stage and he'll take a photograph of Marcel with you as the background. And at that point, I'll ask you to stand, so it makes just a terrific picture for Marcel in the museum to have. So that'll be how we'll close our program. I'd like to remind you that we close our program for 2016 tomorrow, and we'll resume again in March of 2017, and the museum's website will provide information about the start of our program. So we have microphones on either side of the aisle. We ask if you have a question, wait till you have the microphone. Try to make your question as brief as you can. I will repeat it just to make sure everybody, including Marcel, hears it, and then he'll respond to your question. And then we'll turn to the closing remarks of Marcel. So do we have a brave soul to start us off with a question we got right? Oh, it popped up simultaneously. We have two right here.
Hi. I should just pass stuff to my daughter here because she raised her hand at the same time. But the question I have is, do you remember talking to your parents, maybe in the States, where, maybe they were just a little traumatized after, maybe like a little PTSD? Do you remember any kind of emotional stories they might have had, later on, or just some behaviors that you noticed that might have been from the time of the Holocaust? Do
you remember your parents talking about sort of any of the trauma for them later, particularly like when you got to the States? Did they talk about what it was like for them to be through that time? Never.
My parents, I've never spoken about it. My parents never spoke about it. They did talk about people that they knew that disappeared from life, but otherwise nothing. It's a bad habit with survivors. They don't like to say that they're a survivor. It hurts to talk about it.
Okay, and now your daughter, I think.
So you never went to a concentration camp?
No, the question is, did you go to any concentration camps?
Do what?
She asked if you went to any concentration camps.
No.
No. But other family members did. Yeah.
That's right, and then never come back.
Right. Okay, we have a question over here and then one in the back. Okay.
I'm sorry if you mentioned this already, but what's the name of your cousin Rochelle's book that she wrote?
Oh, the name of your cousin Rochelle's book.
Rochelle.
Rochelle.
It's written by Rochelle Hodak. And you could get it from Switzerland. There's a library that sells it. I should have bought the book. You don't.
Okay. Okay, we got a question back on the aisle there. Yep.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what was the decision like for you to join the military, and what was your reasoning for doing that when you were older, after you moved to the United States?
What was your reasoning, your decision involved to join the Air Force at 19?
Well, at that time, schools had quotas also. And my marks were not that great. I didn't really care about going to school. And the Air Force, you sign up, you go. You know, and it was the best. I could have joined any of the services, but I picked on the Air Force.
Okay. Got another. Let's go here and then back there, and then I think that'll bring us to a close.
I just got two questions. Just wanted to know if if do you have any children, and if
I got 3 sons.
Do you teach them about the history that you had experienced and your family had went through?
Did you tell your children, talk to your children about what you went through?
I tried, but they don't understand. I had one of my sons come to one of our sessions, and he was surprised that he's a son of a survivor.
Which links to your comment. And I think we had one more. Do we? I think back there still. Okay.
Just going back to something that you were saying earlier, that a lot of survivors, you were saying, don't like to talk about the fact that they were survivors, don't like to admit that necessarily. So what's it like for you giving a presentation like this to an audience, a room full of people talking about this experience, when it's something that's clearly a very uncomfortable topic from what sounds like?
Thank you. So the question is, what's it like for you to share what you went through and your family went through before audiences?
Well, it's something that I feel that I need to give out so that you understand what happened during the Second World War. It was a freakish situation in those days. And now I'm at the position that I could give you knowledge of what went on.
Okay. I'm going to ask one more question before we close, and I turn back to you, Marcel. After your mother died, your father, if you don't mind my asking, he burned all her pictures except for some that you salvaged. Why did he do that?
Well, there's a tradition that in the Jewish tradition, and it's really silly what happened, is that when somebody died, they would tear the picture of the dead person and throw it away. Mm-hmm. It's like you've never been here, but that's the reason. Mm-hmm. My father's trove of pictures had a lot of pictures that were halved, right, because he threw them, tore them apart.
And you salvaged some of them, though.
Yes,
yeah.
The ones you showed.
Were the ones you salvaged, yeah. So on that note, I'm going to turn back to Marcel to close our program. Thank you all for being here. We hope you'll come back in 2017. And remember, when Marcel finishes, Joel's going to come up on stage and take a photograph.
I would like to read a letter that I recently received from a visitor to the museum whom I spoke with. Anyway, I hope I could read better. Dear Mr. Hodak, I want to thank you for being so brave and telling your story. I was only taught about the military part, not about death camps or anything else. And that was in 1987. I did not know until I seen Schindler's List. We watched it as a family. My stepson asked if it really happened, and his dad told him it did. As I sat there, I was so upset to see people treated so cruel. I wish I could have helped, but that was way before I was born. I want to thank you also for serving our country and protecting us. I'm so sorry about your aunt and uncle. Thank you for taking us down history's path and showing us what happens when a man tries to play God, and teaching us so this won't happen again. This is a very touching letter. Is the reason that this museum was built, to teach visitors about the Holocaust. That answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcel.